This is Flavor Profile, a series where we look at ingredients that are similar to each other, in some cases even interchangeable. We discuss what makes them similar, but more importantly, where they're distinct. This is a massive flavor profile on brassicas. Brassicaceae is a family of plants that is massive and varied. Historically, it's gone by the name crucifers or cruciferous vegetables, which is still accurate if out of date. While brassicas thrive in the cold weather, many are cultivated to be available year-round. Broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts are popular enough that you're going to find them grown in greenhouses regardless of the season. But there are some vegetables in the family that are really only found during the cold weather. I'm specifically thinking about varietals of turnips and rutabagas. Many of the most popular brassicas to eat all come from the same species, Brassica oleracea, which includes cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and even kohlrabi. I've already covered several brassicas in other videos. I covered many leafy brassicas in my grazing greens video, which you can watch linked here. And I also covered kohlrabi, which in and of itself is a very unusual vegetable because it's not a root, it's actually a bulbing stem. I'll link that video here also. But today, because we have so many vegetables we're going to cover, we're going to sort them by the part of the plant that you would eat. We're going to discuss cauliflower, broccoli, and Romanesco, the buds, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and Napa cabbage, the heads, and rutabaga, turnips, and radishes, the roots. Let's break it down. Our first category of brassicas are the buds. These are all part of the subspecies Botrytis from Brassica oleracea. These are all bred from wild cabbage and actually are unbloomed flower buds. If you allow these to continue growing in your garden, they would eventually turn into massive clusters of flowers. Broccoli is a massive unbloomed flower bud from the species Brassica oleracea. Broccoli is most commonly found in green, but occasionally is also found in purple. While this is a head of broccoli, you can also find sprouting broccoli, which are offshoots from the same plant. Broccoli has a stem, small leaves, and florets at the top. These would turn into flowers if you allowed it to keep growing. Broccoli is fairly dense and has different textures throughout, from the leaves to the stem to the tips. Broccoli is rich in glucosinolates, so it is bitter when raw and can become smelly if overcooked. But when cooked properly, it becomes rich and sweet. Generally speaking, when you cook broccoli, you're going to break it down into small florets and then either roast it, boil it, steam it. It's kind of your oyster, but be careful because if overcooked, the end of florets can become kind of mushy and unpleasant in texture. Cauliflower is very closely related to broccoli, and although historically the less popular of the two, is becoming more popular these days. Cauliflower can be found in several colors, most often white, but also in orange and purple, although all the different colors pretty much taste the same. Cauliflower is less dense than broccoli and has a milder flavor, not quite as bitter when raw or as sweet when cooked, and it becomes very creamy when roasted. Due to its lower bitterness and textural difference, you don't have to be as worried about overcooking cauliflower as you do broccoli. While cauliflower can be found with its leaves, these are kind of like collard greens and not as pleasant to eat. So generally speaking, you're going to remove the leaves and the base stem before breaking it into florets. Cauliflower can be prepared in many ways. While most popularly broken down into florets and then roasted or stewed, you can also cut it into thick steaks or chop it very small into cauliflower rice, which is very popular among low-carb diets. Romanesco's official name is Romanesco broccoli, but it isn't a broccoli at all. It's actually a varietal of cauliflower. Romanesco is incredibly beautiful and distinct. It is always a bright chartreuse color and grows in a fractal structure. If you've never had Romanesco before, it's really a balance between broccoli and cauliflower. It's less mild than cauliflower, but less pungent than broccoli. Like other cauliflowers, Romanesco should have its stem and leaves removed before cooking, but unlike cauliflower, there is a textural difference between the base of the florets and the tips, so you have to be careful not to overcook it. Hey, I'm going to jump in here real quick with a technique tip on how to cut cauliflower. You can find massive heads of cauliflower, and most of the time you're going to want to break this down smaller in order to cook it. But as you may have noticed before, if you don't cut cauliflower the right way, it tends to crumble and fall apart, which not only makes a giant mess on your cutting board, but also is a waste of a good vegetable. But there's a way to cut cauliflower where you're not going to get all the crumbs, and instead you'll get a nice tidy floret at the end. To cut cauliflower, the first thing you're going to do is flip it upside down and look at the root base. Take any extra leaves that you don't need and break those off. Once you have a good visual on the stalk, go ahead and take a knife and slowly go around breaking away that stalk base. Eventually it should be loose enough that you can use your hand to crack it and take it out. At this point, your goal is to use the knife as little as possible. Go ahead and break that large head into smaller pieces using your hands. If you need to break it down smaller, use your knife to only cut slits into the base of the stalk. Don't actually cut the end of the florets. Cutting the end of the florets is how you're going to create a crumbly mess. Use those little slits to break off the little tree portions, and you'll end up having a large array of ready-to-go florets. More often than not, I just roast cauliflower, but there are many things you can do with it. If you have a way that you love to cook cauliflower, please leave a comment. Up next, we're going to discuss Brassica Heads. These are brassicas where we don't eat the flowering bud, but rather we eat clumped together leaves that form into a singular head. Cabbage is a bulbing head of leaves of the species Brassica oleracea, which means, interestingly enough, that this is more closely related to broccoli than it is to Napa cabbage. Cabbage comes in several colors and varietals, although most commonly at the grocery store, you're going to find smooth leaf varietals in either green or reddish purple. Cabbage is an incredibly old cultivated vegetable and is popular worldwide in many cuisines, but you have to be careful when cooking it because cabbage is incredibly high in glucosinolates, which means it is exceptionally bitter, and if you cook it too long, will have an incredibly pungent smell and bad taste. To fight that bitter taste, cabbage is often served raw, like in coleslaw, or pickled or fermented, like in sauerkraut. You can definitely cook cabbage, but you need to be careful not to overcook it to avoid that pungent, sulfury smell. Brussels sprouts look like tiny heads of cabbage on a stalk, although usually at the grocery store you'll buy them in individual little heads in bags. Brussels sprouts are a funny vegetable because historically we think of them as being very smelly and yucky and not good to eat. But nowadays they're having a resurgence in popularity. You'll find these all the time fried on restaurant menus. So are they just better tasting now? Actually, yes. In the 1990s, agricultural scientists were able to isolate and breed out the bitter trait from Brussels sprouts, which means modern Brussels sprouts are significantly less bitter than they were historically. That being said, you really should not overcook Brussels sprouts because when overcooked, they'll develop that pungent, stinky, sulfury smell and taste. Brussels sprouts are best served sliced up with the outer leaves removed and either roasted or fried. Napa cabbage is also known as Chinese cabbage, and although it looks similar to these other heads, it is not of the same species. This is from Brassica rapa, which is the same species as bok choy and rapeseed, which is pretty well known for its oil. Unlike other cabbage heads, Chinese cabbage is long and relatively loose, and it has a much more delicate flavor. It's not as high in glucosinolates. Because of its loose packed structure, you need to be a little more careful when washing Napa cabbage compared to other cabbages, but you also don't have to be as careful about the bitterness. In Chinese culture, Napa cabbage is associated with prosperity and wealth. There, it's often served fermented, and in Korean cuisine, it's often served in kimchi. Napa cabbage is wonderful when put in stews or stir fries, but is also served raw and can sometimes be substituted for Savoy cabbage in salads. In case you didn't know, I used to be a science teacher, so while we have this red cabbage here, we're going to do a little bit of food science fun. Did you know there are ingredients that will change color based on what they are cooked with? Because they can indicate the pH of ingredients around them, we call them pH indicators. The pH scale is a measurement of how acidic or basic alkaline a solution is. The scale goes from 0 to 14, and kind of confusingly, true neutral, like water, is right in the middle at a 7. Everything that is below 7 is acidic. Everything that is above 7 is basic or alkaline. In case you didn't know, we use acids and bases all the time in cooking. Acids are things that taste sour to our tongue. Things like lemon juice, vinegar, and even milk are on the acidic side of the spectrum, which means that they are high in hydrogen ions. Mild acids are delicious and a huge part of cooking. It's only really highly acidic things with a pH close to 0, that are dangerous for us. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have alkaline items, which are also important for cooking. Alkaline things taste bitter on our tongue. Baking soda is one of the most commonly used alkaline items. And again, things that are mildly alkaline are not a problem whatsoever. It's only when things become exceptionally alkaline, up near a 14, like bleach, that it becomes an issue for our bodies safety-wise. Red cabbage contains compounds called anthocyanins. They are pigments that will change color based on the pH around them. If you soak red cabbage leaves in water, those anthocyanin pigments will soak out and leave you with a purple stained water. That purple water is now a pH indicator. It will change color based on what it's exposed to. When you expose it to acids like lemon juice, vinegar, or milk, it will turn pinkish red. And when you expose it to alkaline solutions like baking soda or bleach, it will turn bluish green. There are many natural pH indicators in the food world, from red cabbage to butterfly pea flower, which I like to buy a gin of that changes color, and turmeric. Next time you buy red cabbage to cook, if you want to do this experiment for yourself, go ahead and remove the outer leaves before cooking, soak them in some water, and you'll have your own pH indicator. And last but not least, we're going to cover brassicas, where we eat the roots. This category is the most widespread in terms of species. In fact, the 3 varietals we're covering today are all from different species. In general, you will eat the roots, but I will note that on many of these, like turnips, you can also eat the leaves. Rutabagas go by many names, including Swedes or kohlrabi. Rutabagas are root vegetables of the species Brassica napus. On the outside, they are a dull yellowish white with some purple. And while I have a relatively small one here, they can grow very large. When picking a rutabaga, you should always try to find one that feels dense and not hollow. They have an incredibly long shelf life, but as they go bad, they will begin to hollow out from the inside and have an almost light feeling when you pick them up. While sometimes you can find rutabaga with leaves, in general, you're just going to find the root itself. Rutabagas are very starchy and therefore are wonderful when roasted or turned into a mash. As you cook them, the yellow inside becomes very sweet and soft. In general, you will peel them before cooking, but if they are young and have relatively thin skin, you can leave that on. Turnips are a root vegetable from the species Brassica rapa. There are many varietals of turnips. Here I have the conventional white and purple turnip, but you can also find Japanese white turnips known as Hakurei turnips. I really like getting those in the spring, as well as other more unusual varietals. Today at the co-op, I was able to find these incredible scarlet turnips that almost look like radishes. Turnips have a white interior regardless of their external color and are peppery and mildly bitter when eaten. You can have them raw, especially when they're small and young like this, but they're often served roasted. If you buy small ones, you don't have to peel them, but as they get larger and older, the exterior part tends to get tough. Turnips are less starchy than rutabagas. If you want to serve turnips in a mash, you probably want to go 50-50 with potatoes to get the right texture. Radishes are actually a part of the mustard family and of the species Raphanus sativus. Radishes are notoriously quick-growing and come in many varietals. I conventionally think of the small pink ones, but there are also French fingerling radishes, black radishes, watermelon radishes, and the very popular daikon radish, which can grow incredibly large. Radishes are crisp and have an incredibly peppery taste. While you can pickle radishes or serve them roasted, more often than not, you're just going to eat radishes raw. Radish leaves can be eaten, but are often very dirty and you need to significantly clean them before cooking them. And now I think Alex has some questions.
Hi, my name's Alex, and I have some questions. Kara, I know that when we roast broccoli or cauliflower or even Brussels sprouts in the oven, it smells great and they taste fantastic too. But when I try to microwave it the next day for leftovers, it smells like garbage. Why can brassicas be so stinky when I cook them?
Brassicas are notoriously smelly, especially when cooked the wrong way or microwaved from leftovers. The smell of brassicas comes from glucosinolates, sulfur-rich compounds that grow inside brassicas. Sulfur smells like farts or rotten eggs and is not very appetizing. When brassicas break down, they create sulfur smells. So the follow-up question that Alex doesn't even need to ask is, how do we avoid those smells? And that's pretty straightforward. You want to cook your brassicas in a way that does not disturb the cell wall too much as they are being cooked. When you roast brassicas, the water will evaporate and they will be sealed slightly from heat, so you're not going to get as smelly of a vegetable. The same goes for any sort of pickling, fermentation, or quick pan cooking. While it is very healthy to boil or steam vegetables, doing that cooking process is generally the worst way in terms of smell for brassicas.
Kara, this Romanesco looks insane. It almost looks alien. I don't quite understand what I'm looking at when I see it. And it looks very different from all of this cauliflower and broccoli on the table. Why does Romanesco look the way that it does? Hey, still me. Turns out I really like Romanesco. The reason that it looks this way is because of the rate of growth on each of these individual buds and the head as a whole. You see how cauliflower kind of looks smoother than Romanesco? The reason for that is because cauliflower grow at a fairly uniform rate. A floret is a plant's attempt at making a flower. I don't know if Romanesco eventually becomes a flower, but the reason that this looks the way that it does is because as Romanesco grows, every bud that grows from the very center grows faster than the one before it. And if you look really closely and zoom all the way in at this plant, you would find that it actually grows in a Fibonacci spiral. When a plant grows in the Fibonacci sequence, it looks familiar to us because so many things in nature grow just this way. And it's really cool when you have a plant that tastes as delicious as Romanesco does, while also looking familiar to us and looks way cooler. Kara, I have one more question. Is it possible to juggle Romanesco? Hey, me again, I have an answer. It is possible to juggle Romanesco. You do it like this.
This has been a massive flavor profile on brassicas. We have covered 9 different types of vegetables, some of which have crazy variations. I hope you are inspired to branch out and add a new vegetable to your dinner, or bare minimum, not overcook your cabbage till it is a smelly mess. And until next time, I'm Kara, and I can cook.